Hey, how's it going, my friend? So this one is really long, and I really enjoyed reading it, though. Um, so I'm just gonna go ahead and read it, and then break it down as I go. And yeah, I really enjoyed this chapter. It's been a lot of fun and new ideas. So it's different from the previous one in that I sense that I learned much more in this one. So let's just go for it. So how to balance power. So Minogue says the history of Europe has been a history of war. No state has been able to dominate another state. Instead, all European states have banded together to fight a powerful state. And all of European history can be summarized as preparing for war, waging war, and recovering from war. So I think it's interesting because I think after the collapse of Rome and after Christendom took over, a lot of Vikings from Sweden and Norway moved to continental Europe, and then they all went sectarian, like everybody formed their own groups, and then all Europeans have been doing is just battling each other out. And Rome was the unifying factor, just like they mentioned China is a unifying factor. So here they say Clovis converted to Christianity, yet Christianity made him want to fight for Christianity as opposed to no fighting. So Minogue says that while Christianity brought a lot of good attributes, it also made people want to fight for its values as opposed to not fight. So warriors fought each other, but then stopped when absolute monarchies took over. So, and this is something that he talked in a previous chapter. I can't specify the second or the third, but in a previous chapter where he says that warriors used to fight each other, and then absolute monarchs took over, and then warriors stopped. And then these monarchs decided that they wanted to strengthen their power on the state. So if you guys see, France tends to be much more centralized with Clovis as a king, and well, Germany, it's all princehoods with different princes ruling over, and it says, according to Minogue, they stopped fighting when the when like a prince or consolidated their power. And I bet this happened as well in Italy, since it also shares a similar history to Germany. And then Clausewitz, this was a military theorist from Prussia, and Prussia was Germany before what we know as today as Germany was Germany. So, for the war was a continuation of policy through force. Rulers attacked when they knew they had an advantage, while they defended to protect the national interests. Now, if I see this very historically, I think all of this is the fallout of what came after Rome's collapse. It just became a group of different states battling each other constantly. And Hobbes stressed a common superior to prevent wars. So Hobbes is a British philosopher, and he had a lot of good ideas, and he believed that there needed to be a common superior to prevent most of these wars. And I think he's right, because when the US and the USSR took over, they also had this effect of Europeans not fighting each other. So Hobbes stressed a common superior. Hobbes argued that when there was no superior, men fought wars against each other. Hobbes argued that man, under the state of nature, would be follow a life that's nasty, solitary, brutish, and short. So Hobbes is a very insightful guy, and I'll definitely read his work. It's coming up, guys. So for all you Hobbes fans, I'm definitely gonna read him. And I actually read this one time at at a college like I was visiting, and then I started playing like a lot of songs and made friends with people there. It's a long story, but I have fond memories of reading Hobbes' work. So, say it used to be the scarcity of resources, land and water. So he's trying to get to theories as to why wars happen. He says scarcity of resources, humans' desire for glory, and then Hobbes' own idea is that define diffidence, the mistrust of others, and then Hobbes argued for a civil association which will rule over humans and maintain peace. Hobbes thought it would come about through conquest. So I'm not exactly sure what this civil association means. Maybe it's a nation state, because Minogue doesn't explores Hobbes' ideas this chapter in a lot more depth. He only just gives an overview. So I think what he's trying to get at least Minogue, not Hobbes, is that a power like China, like they can conquer all the states, or Rome. So like they can conquer all the states and just take over, or Greece under Alexander the Great, and then people won't fight wars. And Hobbes said like, oh, it can be formed if one powerful state takes over all the other states. But and then that's a metaphor about states and individuals, and that what Hobbes is saying, and Minogue agrees, is that individuals are always distrustful of each other, but they won't attack each other, or they might, but sometimes they don't have the strength. Well, states have that power, and Hobbes actually has a bit of a, I wouldn't say cynical, maybe cynical view of humans, that the natural relationship for humans is to fight each other. Like when one is alone at night, like one is with their guard up, because one thinks that someone can come and try to steal from them or attack them. So Hobbes thinks people are like that and states are like that. So what Minogue argues is that, and Hobbes to an extent, that there has to be a way to hamper this type of relationship. Minogue argues that a strong power like the US or USSR were deterrents for Europeans to fight wars, showing Hobbes' theory that there is a superior force which could bring small powers to stop fighting. And also, to the people who read Watchmen, Alan Moore also applies this theory, but he says the only way for the US and USSR in the 1980s, in the alternative future he sets up, to work together is for an alien force to come and they all will band together. So he also takes, most likely because he's a well-read guy, Alan Moore, he probably took it from Hobbes. Minogue highlights the uniqueness of Europe in that no bigger power has been able to dominate others, unlike, say, in China, a unified state took over. So he gives non-Western examples or non-European examples where usually there's a big state. In the case of China, maybe India. I don't know much about India because I can't say India, but I think Hobbes hints at it, or maybe even Brazil nowadays. It's like a large state. Well, the Hispanic states are broken down. So he's saying that in a non-European country or set of countries, something like that can happen, that like a big power takes over, where in Europe it's been a struggle to do that. So plays the bandwagon effect, where people want to associate themselves with those in power and success. So then this is a different idea. But my theory of this is that Europe, everybody speaks a different language. Well, language is a unifying force. I bet people, from what I know about China, like they probably speak Han Chinese, and from what I know, for instance, in Brazil, like why is like people don't fight against each other is because they all speak the same language. So there is a unified sense, and maybe the United States people can say that as well. Like people are not battling over each other. Well, in Europe, there's all these linguistic wars. It's a theory that's worth exploring, and I bet other people have also talked about it. So explains the bandwagon effect, where people want to associate themselves to power and success. So here now, Minogue switches the discussion from foreign policy to domestic policies, and he says certain countries, I bet he means like the Middle East, like they might have a bandwagon effect, where people want to associate themselves with power and success, and it's in some states, in their expansionism, seek that others are reduced to impotent or clientele basal states. So let's go back to the USSR, so people don't say that I comment on modern politics. Like right now, not right now, like back in the day, the USSR tried to reduce countries like Poland, for instance, into a vassal state, where the states just didn't speak up, like they just followed. So he's saying that the natural end of a state is to expand its power and to have a set of basal states. And there's other Western examples, but I don't want to mention them. Like, let's just focus on past history. So Minogue argues that capitalism, everybody gets richer, and then Minogue goes into a discussion on capitalism, goes on to say that states have the interest, and interests change, thereby alliances are constantly changing. And he Charles de Gaulle, and maybe de Gaulle follow a realpolitik policy like Bismarck. Like I know Charles de Gaulle from his speech to the Quebecois people, but like what he's saying is that he followed a philosophy that was about focusing more on immediate realities. So what is the national interest? And then Minogue goes to explore that concept of national interest. National interest means the security of the state. For instance, the Suez Canal was in the national interest of Britain while it ruled India, but once it stopped ruling it, it was no longer a national interest. So he's saying national interest can change, but then he also says it doesn't change, so this is an interesting part of the discussion. For instance, okay, I'll say something contemporary or not so contemporary, but like the US with the Monroe Doctrine. And the idea is that the US didn't want European powers to interfere in the affairs of Latin America since it was so close by. So I'm not quite sure. Well, I guess Minogue says that, okay, maybe it's driven by reality, but then he also says that it's not really a choice. For instance, revolutionaries in the USSR or France, when they took over, they still follow certain policies. And some might call this colonialists, but they also wanted to expand the power of the state, even if their ideology, their domestic ideology, had changed. So he's saying that while domestic politics can change, foreign policies have might be more inflexible. So he hasn't explored further, but I think there's a lot more to talk about this topic, and hopefully in future chapters he mentioned it. So foreign policies can remain in place even with new leaders. Nationalist or expansive interests can have a theory behind them. And yeah, Monroe Doctrine is one, and there's also one where like certain thinkers had other ideas of like expanding civilizations, and we see it with Spaniards and French and other theories. So Hobbes says that force and fraud are virtues in war. So now Hobbes is talking about Machiavellian sort of ideas of realpolitik. And this is realpolitik because I study a lot of Bismarck, so that's why I'm associating with that. But I think he's trying to get to some of these ideas. But once we see Machiavelli, which I'll definitely cover, Bismarck, which possibly I cover, but like more thinkers like that, we'll talk about this. There's been a movement starting with Roman Christianity to turn Europe into international order. So then Minogue then goes back to Christianity and the idea of Christendom, that it is more unifying, because Christianity, at least Catholicism, is more universalist and about expanding and bringing people together. So, and it's interesting because Christianity, just like Christianity talked about individual salvation, look at this very unique contribution that Romans didn't have. They also brought this other idea, which was mitigation strategies for wars, like ambassadors, truces, conventions on how to treat prisoners. And this all led to the Red Cross. For those of you guys familiar who study World War II, for instance, we see a lot of topics on the Red Cross, and cosmopolitans from the rational era dreamed of a universal republic. And I think cosmopolitans, yeah, we'll talk about them eventually later. But he hasn't talked that much in this chapter on cosmopolitans, but they have this universal republic. So then what he's going to say, Minogue, is there's two groups. One is the Realists and one is the Idealists. So the Realists think in terms of nation states, and the Idealists think in terms of international order. So the Realists are always going to go for nation states are the norm, and then the Idealists are saying like, no, we should have an international order. So nuclear weapons show that war can't be rationalist. The interdependence of trade between the nations, environmental policies require action, and human rights, which might clash with conceptions of certain societies. And it's interesting because all of this, now that we live in this progressive era, all of these debates have been going on now with the whole Brexit and the Trump era that or the EU era as well, where we're talking about all these ideas between nationalists on one side and globalists or internationalists on the other side. So here he gives the argument. Here Minogue frames it, because he might have written that text slightly earlier, between the idealists and the realists. And he's hearing idealists are arguing that because of the state that the world is, with the weapons, with the interdependence of trade, with environmental policies, like there's no way national solutions are enough and international solutions are required. But then he also pushes back against this in an argument about cultural imperialism, in which people have different conception, at least the Western countries, of what human rights are, and they have these more liberal attitudes towards different topics like women's issues and all these other topics which more traditional societies don't share this conception. And we've seen this with the World Cup nowadays. But definitely this clash of civilizations or ideology between liberal order and more conservative societies of other countries. So it's interesting because Idealists praise this. Okay, guys, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks a lot.